Hi, everybody. This is Mr. Zoeller, and today I'm going to be presenting to you about the Declaration of Independence. And we'll be looking at our history book and chapter. So eventually, Thomas Jefferson is going to be asked by the Second Continental Congress to write a declaration, a declaration to the people of the United States eventually. Why do the 13 colonies have the right to be independent from Great Britain? And his writing is going to influence many other countries, as we'll find in the future, when it comes to the role of government, the rights that people have, and their relationship that they have together. So Thomas Jefferson's asked to write a declaration or a formal statement of independence, and he's also going to be assisted by John Adams and Benjamin Franklin. And so in the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson says that people are born with rights, that these rights are natural, and that God has given all people these rights. And so he argues that all people are born equal in God's sight. That goes back to the first Great Awakening, and that we are given the same basic rights, which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we'll talk about in class those ideas coming from a British philosopher, John Locke. So these rights are unalienable, and so inalienable means something that cannot be taken from you. So the government's role, he says, is to protect those rights. The government protects your right to life. The government protects your right to liberty. The government protects your right to the pursuit of happiness. However, if the government is failing to do that and is not protecting your rights, then you have the right to change or abolish the government to make one that will. And that is his main argument he's using why the colonists have the right to separate from Great Britain.
During the late 1760s, resentment against British rule began to grow in colonial America. Taxes imposed by Britain sparked angry protests. These disputes soon turned violent and led in 1775 to the first battles of the American Revolution. Despite the fighting, few colonists openly called for independence at first. Only 1/3 of the colonists wanted a rebellion, another third were against it, and the remaining third were indifferent. But public opinion began to shift, helped in part by a pamphlet written by Thomas Paine, an Englishman recently arrived in America. Paine had difficulty finding a typesetter to print his work, as it would be considered treasonous. Finally, in January of 1776, a rebel printer published it. The pamphlet was called Common Sense. In its 47 pages, Paine made the case for independence by attacking the idea that Britain's king should rule the American colonies. Common Sense was read aloud from street corners and pulpits and in taverns, parlors, and schools. On June 7, 1776, a member of the Continental Congress meeting in Philadelphia voiced the idea of independence. Richard Henry Lee, a tobacco planter from Virginia, rose to offer a resolution.
That these united colonies are free and independent states. That they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown.
Congress appointed a 5-man committee to draft a Declaration of Independence. The members included Benjamin Franklin and John Adams. But none of the senior members wanted the job of writing it. They believed the document itself would be an historical footnote, a technicality. As a result, the task was given to the committee's youngest member, 33-year-old Thomas Jefferson. Working for 2 days and nights in his second-story rented room, Jefferson bent over his portable writing table and produced the first draft of the most enduring protest document in the history of the free world. Jefferson's magnificent words were not wholly original. He borrowed from fellow Virginian George Mason, who in turn had borrowed from the 17th century British philosopher John Locke. Just weeks earlier, Mason had written in the preamble to the Virginia Constitution that all men by nature are equally free and independent and have certain inherent rights, namely the enjoyment of life and liberty.
There's nothing new in the Declaration of Independence. If its arguments hadn't been familiar and understandable, it wouldn't have been a very powerful document of justification.
After 9 hours of heated debate, Congress passed the Resolution for Independence. 13 separate English colonies now called themselves the United States of America. The vote for independence came on July 2nd, 1776, a date John Adams was certain would go down in history. 2 days later, on the 4th, the delegates approved the text of Jefferson's Declaration. About a month later, a formal copy of the Declaration was ready to be signed by all the members of Congress. The President of Congress, John Hancock, was the first to sign the document. In fewer than 40 words, Jefferson defined the ideals of the newborn nation in the Declaration's opening words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
And so he is going to be listing grievances against the king in regards to that. So John Locke is going to play a huge role when it comes to the ideas that the colonists are using when it comes to independence. So he's an English philosopher from the Enlightenment era. He came up with the idea of natural rights. And so Locke believed that your natural rights were life, liberty, and property. And Jefferson is going to change property there to the pursuit of happiness, realizing that not all people property is something that's essential to them. And so he believed that rulers received the right to govern, not from God, so it's not the divine right of kings, but he says people get the right to rule from, that the government, gets the right to rule from the people. And so he believed that if a ruler is unjust, if this is an example of tyranny and abuse of power, then that ruler should be forced from power. And so that's going to, of course, be in regards to King George III here. So Thomas Jefferson is arguing that if the government's not protecting those three natural rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, then the people have the right to abolish, get rid of that government. So he needs to also back that up with, well, how have the British done that? So Jefferson argues that the king has established an absolute tyranny over these states, over these colonies, saying that he has continually abused his power. And every time that the king has been asked by the colonists to change something through their protests, through their letters, whatever they're doing, the king has ignored them. So he lists example after example after example of how the King of England has abused his power. Now, one thing about the Declaration of Independence is Jefferson also included a phrase in there regarding to slavery, blaming the slave trade on the King of England as well. And so the idea of should there be slavery is eventually going to be taken out by some of the members of the Second Continental Congress. So the final version of the Declaration of Independence about all men are created equal, the issue of slavery is not going to be present in that. And finally, so Independence Day is the day that we celebrate the final signing of the Declaration of Independence when the last signature is on the page. And so we celebrate that today as Independence Day, the 4th of July. So the delegates at the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, signed the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. Some had signed it in days before, but that's the last day where it was signed. And by putting their name on that paper, they were committing treason against Great Britain, saying we're not going to be a part of your country anymore. And they would have the death penalty put on their heads. They would be hanged if they were caught. And we'll find out later in class that some were killed in the Revolutionary War, and there were some that were captured and that were hanged. And Benjamin Franklin, one of the delegates that was there, said it the best, that we must all hang together, or most assuredly, we shall all hang separately. So saying we all need to be in together for this. And so this is the day we celebrate the birth of the United States, when we are declaring to the world, we are free, we are independent, we do not need the British anymore, and we're going to tell you why. And that's what the whole focus of the Declaration of Independence is.